Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin. 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 On Pesach night we set the Seder table, gather around with friends and family. We read from the Haggadah, sharing stories once again of how we once were slaves, but now we're free. The youngest asked the questions, and we listened as she spoke. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Why is this night so different from the rest? Why do we eat the herbs of bitterness? Why do we eat matzah? Why can't we eat bread? How come we don't sit up straight but we recline instead? So many questions running through my mind. Why? The Seder plate is full of many symbols to remind us of our struggle and our tears. But through our pain and strife, we always manage to survive. And that's why we tell the story every year. Though time keeps marching forward, we must not forget the past. It's the Passover tradition for the youngest child to ask. Why is this night so different from the rest? Why do we eat the herbs of bitterness? Why do we eat matzah? Why can't we eat bread? How come we don't sit up straight but we recline instead? So many questions running through my mind. Why? So many questions running through my mind. Why? Avadim hayinu. Once we were slaves to Pharaoh. Now we are free to Zoom. Sing the songs and recount the sacred stories of the season with us, and learn why you cannot just pass over our seders without finding meaning, feeling motivated, and fully tapping in to your soulful side. Details on our website. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu. L'shana haba'ah, beYerushalayim. In need of a redemption tale? At the Micah Seder, we will practice the rituals, relive the story, drink 4 cups of wine, recline in celebration of freedom, and rediscover hope. Observe the most commonly celebrated Jewish event in the most uncommon of ways. Next year in person, this year on Zoom, expect good music, meaningful conversation, and more joy than can fit in 1 hour. Registration available on the Micah website. Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin. L'shana haba'ah, take 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. L'shana haba'ah, beYerushalayim. 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 L'shana haba'ah, Yerushalayim Lishana. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Congregation Micah, where you can experience virtually everything. Shabbat Shalom. Tonight we celebrate the Sabbath on this eve of Passover Eve. Maybe take a moment, if you're not home alone, to say good Shabbos to some of the people you're with. Or Hag Sameach. It is not too early to say Happy Passover. For tonight, we prepare to celebrate our mutual quest for freedom. Passover centers on the story of the Jewish exodus from slavery and the subsequent journey of the Jewish people to self-determination in the land of Israel. It is an ageless tale of rebellion against brutal tyranny that has inspired countless individuals to work for liberty in their own times. Like Micah herself, its themes are universal and therefore worthy of being shared among all peoples, all nations. In each generation and in each year, we retell the story to our children, to our grandchildren, to our neighbors and our friends, to our partners in their struggle for social justice, and to ourselves. We do this so that we will all feel the pain of slavery, understand the value of freedom, and be encouraged to continue to journey towards a more just world. B'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, Chayav Adam lirot et atzma, each of us is obligated to see ourselves, Ka'ilu, as if, hu yatsa mitzrayim, we had just been freed from slavery. We feel so blessed that you have chosen to join us tonight. We hope you will do the same on Zoom tomorrow, or at least mark the holy time in your own traditional ways. I am, as always, Rabbi Flip, and I will be your guide this evening. Let's get in the mood with a little bit more music of the season from our music director, Miss Lisa Silver.
On Pesach night we set the Seder table, gather around with friends and family. We read from the Haggadah, sharing stories once again of how we once were slaves, but now we're free. The youngest asked the questions, and we listened as she spoke. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Why is this night so different from the rest? Why do we eat the herbs of bitterness? Why do we eat matzah? Why can't we eat bread? How come we don't sit up straight but we recline instead? So many questions running through my mind. Why? The Seder plate is full of many symbols to remind us of our struggle and our tears. But through our pain and strife, we always manage to survive. And that's why we tell the story every year. Though time keeps marching forward, we must not forget the past. It's the Passover tradition for the youngest child to ask. Why is this night so different from the rest? Why do we eat the herbs of bitterness? Why do we eat matzah? Why can't we eat bread? How come we don't sit up straight but we recline instead? So many questions running through my mind. Why? So many questions running through my mind. Why?
I'm gonna find the Afikoman. I'm gonna find the Afikoman. I'm gonna find the Afikoman. I'm gonna find the Afikoman.
You are?
Where's the Afikoman?
The book that guides the Passover experience is the Haggadah, the retelling. But we do not learn history at the Seder table. We honor it, we remember it, we relive it, re-experience it. There is, in fact, no biblical Hebrew word for history. The word used to reflect the past throughout the Torah is zachor, which literally means to remember. History is something that happened in the past to someone else. At least that's what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks taught, right? Memory is our story. So here's a little bit of my story. These are my parents, and that is my great-grandmother, Sophie Sabin, preparing the Passover Seder meal. Some relatives. You know, my great-grandmother was not quite a teenager when she began speaking out against the Tsarist government in Kiev. Well, her parents quickly put her on a boat to America. And she lived until I was 16 years old. So I knew her. I asked her once why she came to America instead of traveling to Palestine, and she responded that America was the greatest country in the world because you could say whatever you want. You had the freedom to do whatever you want. My great-grandfather, for whom I'm named, Philip Sabin, came to this country from Russia. He got a job at a supermarket. Family lore says that he knew there'd always be food. Well, they gave rise to a big family. Here we are, the Rices, celebrating Passover in Miami, Florida. And I want to remind us that history is information, that memory is identity. And throughout the retelling of the Exodus during the Seder, what took place becomes part of our collective living memories. What memories at the Seder table do you have growing up? Sitting and hearing the stories from your parents and grandparents, many of whom remain with us only in spirit, in memory. Inviting friends, making friends of strangers, you share a meal. Let all who are hungry come and eat. We are but a link in the Shashelet HaKabbalah, the chain of tradition that stretches back a generation of generations. What memories will you create tomorrow night at your Seder?
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושת נקדיש לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושת נקדיש בשבחך אלוהינו פינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול כי אל מלך גדול הקדוש אתה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושת הנקדיש ברוך אתה אדוני המלך
A poem by Yehuda Amachai. It's called Like One Who Left Egypt, in the middle of the story. Uma choshech chaya. What is the continuity of my life? Ani komo echad sheyatza miMitzrayim. I am like one who went out from Egypt. V'yam suf nivka lishnaim. And the Red Sea split in two. V'ani over becharava. And I am passing through on dry ground. Ushte chomot mayim mimini umismali. And there are two walls of water on my left and on my right. Me'acharei chayil paro ufarashav. And behind me are Pharaoh's forces, his chariots. V'lifnai hamidbar, and before me is the wilderness. Ve'ulai, and perhaps. Ha'aretz ha'muv tachat, the promised land. Zeh meshech chaya. This is the continuity of my life.
Avadim hayinu hayinu ata b'nei chorin Avadim 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 hayinu ata b'nei chorin
Avadim hayinu. Once we were slaves. Ata b'nei chorin. Now we are free. What do these words really mean? I mean, We are slaves because yesterday our people were enslaved. And memory makes yesterday very real for us as Jews. We are slaves today because there are still people in chains all around the world. How can we be truly free when others are in chains? We are slaves because freedom means more than broken chains. Where there is poverty and hunger and homelessness, there is no freedom. Where there is prejudice and bigotry, discrimination, there is no freedom. Where there is violence and war and torture, there is no freedom. And where each of us is less than we might be, we are not free. Not yet. Until then, our song at the sea, like our seders tomorrow evening, are both celebrations and prayers, so that one day all will be free. The words of Mika Mocha.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Matzah. It's the symbol of affliction, of poverty. It evokes in us the hardships and suffering that our ancestors endured. It signals to us that there are those who are still in need today. It's why we say, whoever is hungry, come share our food. To those who are poor or oppressed, we will pray for you. We will work to make this coming year a better one for all. In the telling of the Passover story, we recount the oppression that our ancestors experienced when they were slaves. Observing the ritual of karpas, we dip a growing vegetable, something like parsley. You may have received some seeds at our drive-through Purim carnival. Anyway, we dip the parsley into the salt water to taste the tears of grief mingled with our hope for life, health, renewal. This year especially, with the pandemic as our backdrop, we think of the tears of the sick and of their loved ones who worry or who mourn. We consider the tears of those who lost their jobs, are uninsured, or remain in isolation or quarantine, who have not stopped working this whole time providing essential services to others. We acknowledge the tears of the healthcare workers who save lives at the risk of their own. And we pause now to name this pain, this suffering, to allow space for grief, to pray. The ritual of karpas beckons us at Passover. Look to the future with a sense of hope and possibility. And Passover is almost here. Spring is in the air, and with its pollen and allergies, also there is new growth that is sprouting. All over the world, there is resilience and strength and compassion and innovation. They are all growing out of this tragedy, emerging stronger, like our community here at Micah. And we pray now for all those in this community and others that are sick. You know, Michael Oakes hasn't been with us for a while. He's been in New York caring for his father. So we're going to ask him and Lisa to lead us in our prayer for healing this evening.
May the one who blessed our fathers, may the one who blessed our mothers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer for each other. Shebera.
When we read the 10 plagues at our Passover Seders, we spill drops of wine from our Kiddush cups, emphasizing the pain the Egyptian people endured so that we could be free. This year, we turn our hearts towards the millions of people around the world who have suffered most because of the pandemic. And we send this message from our community at Congregation Micah.
Dam, blood.
We comfort and mourn those whose blood has been spilled.
Sephardeia, frogs.
We protest the proliferation of violence.
Kenim, lice.
We look to stop the infestations of anti-Semitism and hate.
Arov, wild animals.
We appeal to all people to respect all creatures and to act with humanity.
Dever, pestilence.
We seek to overcome the sickness of racism and bigotry.
Shechin, boils.
We tend to those who suffer from dis-ease.
Barad, hail.
We respond to tornadoes and floods and all kinds of disasters.
Arbe, locusts.
We fill the air with voices of justice and compassion.
Choshech, darkness.
We bring light to those who live in the shadows.
Makot barachot, death of the firstborn.
We inspire the next generation to carry on the struggle for a better world.
When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell, O Pharaoh, let my people go.
Are you ready for some magical Micah midrash? We are taught to see ourselves ke'ilu, as if we experienced the Exodus. Well, we did not all experience it the same. So we've invited to Micah this evening, on the precipice of Passover, some unique characters in the story to give us, some fresh perspective, some different points of view. We want to welcome to Micah this evening an important figure in the history of the Jewish people, here to provide a true exclusive by answering a few questions about Passover from a very different perspective. None other than the political and religious leader of the Egyptian people, known as the Lord of two lands and the high priest of every temple. We thank in advance the Pharaoh of ancient Egypt.
Thank you for having me. It will be nice to have someone listen to me again. A chance to tell my side of the story, to dispel all of that fake news the media feeds people, the kind of stuff that we read about in their Haggadahs. Everyone thinks I was scared, worried that those Israelite slaves would rise up against us. Fear is for losers.
The word Pharaoh is from Greek, actually. It's a form of the Egyptian pero, which was the designation of the royal residence and means great house. What happened to the great house?
My house? My house is still great. You should come play a few rounds of golf with me in the Sinai Desert. Egypt is huge, and it has one of the longest histories of any country, tracing its heritage along the Nile Delta back to the 6th millennial BCE. We were the cradle of civilization. We built the pyramids, the necropolis, the Great Sphinx, Memphis, not the one in Tennessee. Even Moses, the liberator of the Jews, was raised in my house.
Yes, it sort of remains one of the greatest ironic twists in history about your family. I want to ask you about your daughter, the one who saved Moses. She did not seem to follow in your footsteps. She ceased worshiping idols. Some even say that after the Great Exodus, she converted to Judaism.
Hogwash. It's true, she rescued that troublemaker, Mo, brought him into her house, loved him as if she was his own. We all did. He was an attractive child. It was deceiving. This one time I was holding the little guy, and he took my crown right off my head, put it on his own.
Sort of like he would do later when he grew up.
Well, my magicians did fear that he would seize the kingdom from me. What was I going to do? Kill the child? Burn him alive? That's how the stutter came about. A tale for another time.
Yeah. Well, if you could share one thing with our viewers this evening on the eve of Passover Eve, what would it be?
Dreams are a very serious thing. My father told me tales of his viceroy, Joseph, and his unique ability to interpret dreams. My people and the people of Israel dreamed of peace, and it exists now between our two countries. Ultimately, I want people to know this. The day that Moses and Aaron showed up to relay that famous message, "Let my people go," just happened to be my birthday. Everyone else was presenting gifts. When they crashed my party, they crashed my mood as well. I mean, what kind of God sends the leader of the enslaved world directives instead of presents?
Maybe a compassionate God? One who hears the cries of the afflicted and keeps faith with those who sleep in the dust? Regardless, we want to thank you for being with us this evening. May Passover this year be a better one for you. Spoiler alert, it always ends the same. And for all you Jews out there ready to celebrate Passover, remember that just as the Israelites maintained their enslavement, we too have developed our ability to stay strong in troubling times, knowing that liberation from the pharaohs of the world, be them tyrants or viruses, is always possible. We want to welcome to Micah this evening another special gift, another vital figure in the history of the Jewish people, a prophet in his own right, a high priest, and the elder brother of none other than Moses himself, Aharon, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, we are honored that you, the spokesman of the Jewish people during the time of the Exodus, have the time to visit with us for just a bit. I see that your brother Moses is in the background.
Yes, he prefers I speak on our behalf. You should know right off the bat that I feel deeply for all those who are still unable to be with their families on Passover during this pandemic. My brother and I completely understand desperate situations. Everyone, please know that liberation from this nightmare is at hand.
Thank you. You heard it straight from the mouthpiece of the Jewish people. For it was you, Aaron, that actually told Pharaoh to let the people Israel go, using your magic, too, in order to show the might of God.
Listen, Moses went up on Mount Sinai alone. He alone was allowed to approach God.
But later, Moses was ordered to bring you, Aaron, and your sons to a point as high priests, our first religious leaders.
None of us are completely blameless. It was I, for instance, when Moses was delayed on Mount Sinai, who made the golden calf that was idolatrously worshipped by the people.
Yes. And yet, still, once a year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it was you, Aharon, that was allowed to enter into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the sanctuary in which the Hebrew tribes would worship.
That was a long time ago, back when the temple stood. Now I try to catch service at Micah's on Zoom and on live stream.
Well, if you could share one thing with our viewers this evening on the eve of Passover Eve, what would it be?
If you remember and appreciate anything about me and my role in Jewish history, know that I am a lover of peace. I bridge a vast existential difference between Moses and the slaves whom he was charged with liberating. Moses, and I love the guy, grew up in the privilege. He had not been beaten for stumbling over his own exhaustion. His mind had not been numbed by the monotonous horror of slavery. Their burdens had never been his. He had simply never been a slave. He could speak to God without barrier. Advocating for Israel was a more complicated matter.
Yes. We American Jews have been raised, like Moses, among privilege. While this gives us great power to advocate for those in need around the world, it also means that we have not personally shared their experiences. The partnership between Moses and Aaron helps us understand that in situations of disparity, we at Micah must work together with other organizations with common goals. Just as Moses needed you, Aaron, to lead and liberate a nation whose hardships he had never shared, we must cultivate respect and humility as we listen for local wisdom and the discipline to concede that we do not hold a monopoly on solutions. Well, thank you for joining us, and I hope you and your brother have a nice Passover holiday.
Thank you.
For several years now, women have been placing 2 goblets on the Seder table. The first to fill with wine and honor Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, and the second they fill with water to honor another central figure in the Exodus story, one who stands loyally by her brother as he has set afloat on the River Nile, one who calls immediately and arranges for a wet nurse, and who eventually leads our people in singing and dancing on the other side of the Sea of Reeds. We welcome to Micah this evening Miriam the prophetess.
Hello. What a joy to be here. A real honor to be representing the memory of all those Israelite women who suffered the hardships and indignities of slavery, as well as inspired hope in the Promised Land.
How did the Israelite women have timbrels to dance and sing in the wilderness?
Don't y'all in Nashville travel with your musical instruments? We women had so much faith that God would perform miracles and mighty acts when we left Egypt that we knew to take our tambourines. I remind you that I was speaking with God long before Moses. Prophecy runs in our family.
Faith. I also understand from Sifrei on Deuteronomy that the Israelite camps would not set out unless you, Miriam, were in the lead, and that the Midrash lists the well as among the 3 greatest gifts that were given to Israel by merit of their leaders.
Indeed, the manna was given on account of Moses, and the pillar of cloud by merit of Aaron, but the well, that was because of me. Darling, can you not tell I was a central source of Israel's vitality?
Well, your skin definitely looks a lot better than I ever thought it would have imagined. I mean, given your age and the affliction that you suffered.
Yes, I received some Dead Sea treatments due to the criticism I offered the Cushite woman my brother Moses married. Zipporah and I have since reconciled. Now, just so we're clear, the term Cushite described her finest qualities, like her attractiveness and her actions.
Yes. I read once that your affliction was perceived by the rabbis as punishment for the sin of slander against your sin-in-law, but they also described your many merits revealed in the episode. They maintained that, you really just were looking out for your younger brother, Moses, like you always had. And that you received special treatment, that God himself cared for you.
It's one of the profits of the business.
Tell me, the Torah really is silent concerning any marriage or children. I read in the Haggadah traditional tabloids that you were actually married to Caleb and thereby entered the family tree of Judah.
Yeah, well, I would rather not discuss my personal life if you don't mind. The extra pressures on a prophet's family can be enormous, and I'm sure as a rabbi you can consider your own life.
Yeah. Well, if you could share one thing with our viewers this evening on the eve of Passover Eve, what would it be?
Gosh, great question. I think the Passover Seder is a time to reflect on those less fortunate, as well as the good fortune that we now enjoy. And in that spirit, no one should be alone.
And no one has to be alone. The Micah Seder is tomorrow night on Zoom. It's a story with a sad beginning, but a very happy ending. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
The Torah has no word for religion. The closest related concept is what it calls Yirah Adonai, the fear of God. In the great story of the Exodus, 2 very special people apparently believed that God's moral demands outweighed Pharaoh's legal demands. just like those who aided the Nazis feared their power more than they feared the belief in God's judgment. This evening, we have with us two women who modeled for us how ethics are always of greater importance than law. Their subversive actions reminds us of those righteous Gentiles who hid and or rescued Jews during the Shoah, the Holocaust. For when Pharaoh put forth his genocidal instructions, they refused, providing us for the very first recorded incident of civil disobedience in all of history. We welcome to Micah, the midwives of ancient Egypt, Shiphrah and Puah.
Thank you for having us. We don't know how long we need because we'll have to get back to attend the newborns at Micah Children's Academy. Not sure what's in the water here in Nashville, but midwiving to the Jews, it's a lucrative business.
Well, then let's get right down to it. Traditional ideas have that Pharaoh really decided to kill the males on the advice of his counselors.
Whoever gave him that counsel is a fool. He should have had the females killed. If there were no females, who will give birth? One woman cannot marry two men, but one man can impregnate 10 or 100 women. Such fools his advisors were.
Seriously, who in their right mind would order midwives to kill babies? There's no way we're going to follow that.
It just made us work harder to help them live and flourish. When we saw those poor women, we could not help but go and collect food and water from the houses of wealthy women to share with the less fortunate.
Well, God certainly rewarded you for your subversiveness. What's the reward for fear of God?
Let's just say God appreciates us midwives. I mean, Pharaoh never harmed us, even after we failed to implement his edict.
Our reward is the sound of children at play, and we need to get back to that.
Well, Ken, I thank you enough for being here. You represent what it means to stand up on behalf of literally the most vulnerable of all creatures, newborn babies. You both inspire us as a congregation to remain at the forefront of the Reform movement's social action work. Yeah, from direct service to local advocacy. If you could share one thing before you go with our viewers on this evening, on the eve of Passover Eve, what would it be?
Rabbi Flip, we're united by deep belief in the human dignity of each and every person. For some of us, that belief is anchored by history. For others, it's rooted in religious teaching or in the personal relationships that shape our lives.
No matter who we are or even where we are from, everyone is capable of finding sources for inspiration right here in Micah and larger Middle Tennessee community to work for a better world.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
We are blessed this evening to have the opportunity to speak briefly with the only mother Moses ever knew. A princess by birth, the Torah preserves her as anonymous, even though her role in the fate of the Israelite nation is as significant as Moses himself. For if she had not pulled him from the river Nile, delivering him from certain death, he could not have saved our ancestors, and there'd be no holiday celebrations tomorrow evening. A woman who is kind and tender and compassionate. She's described in the Torah only as Bat Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh, suggesting she was perhaps his only daughter. Please welcome the daughter of Pharaoh. Hey, let's begin with an obvious question. What is your name?
Oh, my name is Bitya.
Bitya. Beautiful. As an Egyptian woman, and a princess no less, you enjoyed great liberty. You were allowed to travel freely, able to go down to the Nile to bathe and wash. Tell me, how did you feel when you first saw that small basket floating by?
Oh, it was immediately apparent that he was one of the Hebrew children. The Moyle's work made it quite obvious. But in many ways, I am very different from his father. First off, I have a human heart. And as soon as I opened that basket and saw the lovely child, that poor beautiful baby weeping, his tears opened a well of compassion in my heart, and I felt a tender affection for him, both moving through and within me.
Consider what would have happened if you had not come down to the waters at that moment. Thank God you did. But baby Moses could have been destroyed. Because of you, the Jewish people were saved.
Well, Moses was certainly destined for greatness. It was clear to all who came into contact with him. He was my adopted child. We cared for him for nearly 40 years. We educated him, afforded him all the privileges of the royal court and what it meant to be a son of the royal court. He was surrounded with all the wealth and luxury of Pharaoh's palace. He was taught to speak and write the Egyptian language. His education included arithmetic, geometry, and Egyptian law. We gave him everything, and I am as proud of him as his Jewish mother, Yocheved.
The Hebrew nation, the whole world, really, well, it's indebted to you for his life, his education, his name. You stood alone, effectually, between him and death.
Well, Moses never forgot that he was a Hebrew. And through many years of his time in the palace, he had to endure the envy and hostility of the officers of the royal court, but I really never lost faith in my son.
When Moses killed that Egyptian taskmaster for beating the Hebrew slave, he feared the vengeance of Pharaoh, and he hid the body in the sand. But someone witnessed the deed, and he fled for his life. In essence, he left you behind, the mother whom for 40 years, as you pointed out, lavished care and attention upon him, making life tolerable for him in the land of bondage. Did you ever see him again?
Well, I was alive when he returned to Egypt as the mighty savior and deliverer of the Israelite nation, and he made me very proud.
Well, just one more thing. If you could share just anything with our viewers this evening on the eve of Passover Eve, what would that be?
I remember that Rabbi Laurie gave a great sermon about how easy life would be if there were obvious signs that said things like moral dilemma ahead. None of us knows what it is we will encounter in this life. The Passover Seder is a reminder to us all that we must see the world through each other's eyes.
What an honor to have you, such a kind-hearted Egyptian princess, such a noble and tender woman who lived in such a cruel time. Thank you so much for being here and for being an instrument of saving our greatest prophet from certain death, and by extension, each of us.
Thank you.
I just want to give a quick shout out to the staff at Micah for their willingness to be playful educators. Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow night, the Haggadah will speak of 4 children: the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who's too young to ask. Wise children are studious. They analyze details. So give such kids the tools to discover the power of Passover on their own. Wicked or rebellious children, they want little to do with Passover. They avoid getting involved. Try to teach them to empathize, and maybe enroll them in our religious school right away. Simple kids get overwhelmed. Stick to simple explanations, overall meanings in the story. And for those that are too young to ask, treat them with love and with patience, and tell them a story or sing them the songs and make it a festive experience, one they will remember. There's no judgment here at Micah, just some observations. I shared some of my personal journey. Let's consider the journey of many of the Jews living here in the United States of America. Let's reinvent how the Haggadah tells of the 4 children. The first, known as the wise one, let's call him Jacob. Jacob came to America in the early 1900s, not only because his family had a terribly poor existence in Poland, but also because they were running for their lives to escape pogroms. Jacob and thousands like him came to America with nothing but the dream of freedom. In Poland, as a child, Jacob spoke Yiddish. He went to yeshiva, an Orthodox school. In America, Jacob learned English, but he lived a traditional Jewish life. His commitment to Judaism was unshakable. The second child, the wicked one, let's call him Milton. Milton, the second generation, grew up in America with a strong Jewish identity. He's comfortable when he visits his parents, right? But his home is his. Let's say it's a little more American. Milton experienced a little bit of anti-Semitism, but he never had to run for his life. His goal was to be a success. And if that meant working on Shabbat, something his father Jacob would never do, but Milton did it. He was, in fact, so successful that he was one of the first Jews to be accepted into his local country club that didn't allow Jews before. Well, Milton took his family traveling. They went to Paris and to Rome, but not Israel. He was not in as good a position to teach his son, Joshua, about Passover. Meet Josh, formerly known as the Simple Son. You see, he's the third generation of Jews in America, and he's culturally Jewish. He's attended a Seder at his grandfather Jacob's house, but Josh, who, by the way, is an excellent soccer player, he never really paid attention to his Jewish roots. He felt he may have been simple in his Judaism, but he was smart, like he still went to Duke. And he felt almost no anti-Semitism personally, only saw it on the news. Josh did go on a teen trip to Israel, which sparked an interest in Judaism, until we arrived at the fourth generation. And we're not entirely sure in the fourth generation how to even ask the question. Meet Josh and his wife Christy, and their son Luke. Luke is aware that his father is Jewish, and he loves seeing the old movies of Jacob, his great-grandfather. Other than that, he really has very little connection to Judaism, to the beauty and the power and the joy of Torah. Luke recently registered for Congregation Micah's J-Lab, our online experiment in religious school education. He wanted me to thank you, Micah, for inviting people like him, folks who are disengaged or either on purpose or by accident, who are living far away from a Jewish life. Luke, Josh, Christy, welcome to our sometimes dysfunctional, often confusing, but always loving community. We really miss people like you. We need all the Lukes we can get. So tell your friends. Yeah. If you ask a kid, to tell them the best part of the Passover Seder, chances are they'll answer the Afikomen. It's one of the final rituals of the long evening, coming at the end of the Seder meal, and it tends to involve presents for children. This custom gives the children something to look forward to, and the anticipation sort of helps them stay awake. But there's more to it than that. The secret of the Afikomen ritual. Whom must we trust to bring the other half? The children. In the end, the most important piece, the point of it all, is the future. Our own redemption is in the hands of the youngest generation. And we have no choice but to trust them to bring it to the table. Because just a few pages later, we open the door for Elijah the prophet, whom the tradition imagines will eventually usher in a time of ultimate peace. We recognize that perfection is hidden away. But with the ritual of the Afikomen, we live into our hope, our confidence, that it will be found and unwrapped by our children, so that they may eat fully of the bread of redemption. The Seder is about pointing forward. Only the children can taste the future.
How can I pursue justice? How can I see justice? How can I pursue justice? It's not my responsibility. It's not responsibility. It's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility. How am I supposed to solve problems?
How are you supposed to solve problems?
How can I solve problems? How can I fix things?
Passover is a time of memory. Tomorrow evening we will gather around our Seder tables, and there will be empty chairs, not just for Elijah, but also for people unable to travel for the pandemic, or worse, people who have passed. Our community honors the yard sites of the following individuals: Wilbur Avery, Joel Blatt, Murray Brown, Lillian Feldman, Louis Gerber, Alvin Gertner, Franklin Roland Greenspan, Barbara Hochberg, Jeffrey Josman, Maddie K. Kaplan, Elaine Markstein, and Jeanette M. Marks, Susan Moss, Richard Oppenheimer, and Deborah Prevost, Benjamin Rappaport, Rose Sachs, Pauline Siegel, Ray Shaw, Jack Silver, Howard Stringer, Doris Zimmerman Tannenbaum, and Dorothy Weissel. We also continue to mourn as a community for Rich Michelle, Henry E. Foyer, and Dr. Bob Sirkin, Aidan Becker, Robert Golden, and Des Zamek, Elaine Farinacci, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Charlene Creeley, John Giffen, and Faye Sirkin, Joyce Murray, Richard I. Bourne, Fran Schmerling, and Peggy J. West, Christopher Miller, and Molly Stein. We, of course, invite you to add any of the names you like as I lead us in Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirute ve'yamlich malchute, b'chayachon uv'yomachon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala avizman kariv ve'imru. Amen. Yehesh me'laba v'rak le'alam almei almaya, yitbarak v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nekamata, damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. We ask that the source of peace send peace to all people who are mourning, comfort to all people who may be bereaved. And we say one final time together. Amen.
Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim. Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a, Lishana haba'a beYerushalayim.